The Sega Saturn is a fifth-generation home video games console developed by Sega Enterprises Limited that was first released in 1994. The Saturn was initially successful in Japan, but not in the United States, where it was hindered by a surprise May 1995 launch, 4 months before its scheduled release date. The Saturn is considered a commercial failure. This was affected by the cancellation of Sonic X-Treme, planned as the first 3D entry in Sega's popular Sonic the Hedgehog series. The Saturn was succeeded in 1998 by the Dreamcast, having sold 9.26 million units sold worldwide, most in Japan. The Saturn's reception was mixed due to its complex hardware design and limited third-party support. Sega's management was also criticised for its decisions during the Saturn's development and discontinuation. For this video, thanks to finally getting details from reliable sources, I will be doing the top 10 best-selling Sega Saturn games of all time. This information is correct as of May 2025. Let us begin.
And every inch a Sega.
Dark Savior is a 3D mixed-genre video game developed by Climax Entertainment and published by Sega. Dark Savior is a combination of 3 different gameplay genres: a platform jumping game, a puzzle adventure game, and a fighting game. Aside from 1 or 2 sections which blend platform jumping and puzzle elements, these 3 gameplay types are kept distinct and separate. The fighting game sections actually run in an entirely different gameplay mode. Unlike the rest of the game, which features full 3D movement, the fighting sections use 3D graphics, but are played entirely in 2 dimensions. Dark Savior received generally positive reviews. Comments on the game varied widely, though the most common subject of praise was the large, graphically impressive polygonal environments. The game went on to sell approximately 920,000 copies worldwide. Sakura Wars is a 1996 cross-genre video game developed by Red Company and published by Sega. It is the first installment in the Sakura Wars series, created by Oji Hiroi. Sakura Wars is a cross-genre video game in which the player controls Ichiro Ogami and the all-female flower division of the Imperial Combat Review, who must save Tokyo from the Hive of Darkness. Dubbed a dramatic adventure game and taking place across 10 episodes, the gameplay segments incorporate tactical role-playing, dating sim, and visual novel elements. Due to its Japanese exclusivity, most of the English-language reviews for Sakura Wars were published years after the initial release. Famitsu and Sega Saturn magazine gave the original version of Sakura Wars high praise. The game went on to sell approximately 950,000 copies. Virtual On Cyber Troopers is a 3D action video game developed and published by Sega, a robot-themed shooter and fighter. Initially, the game was to be released under the title Virtual On in Japan and Cyber Troopers in North America and Europe, but ultimately these 2 names were combined into a single title for all regions. Virtual On is set up similar to a versus fighting game. The players use a variety of firearms, explosives, melee weapons, and other techniques to destroy the enemy for a set number of rounds, usually a single battle, or best 2 out of 3 rounds like fighting games. There were also 2-player online versions of the game released in America and Japan, using the Netlink and X-Band services respectively. A twin-stick controller was developed and released for the Saturn specifically to be used with Virtual On. The game was popular, especially in Japan, and went on to sell just over 950,000 copies worldwide. Shining Force 3 is a tactical role-playing game released for the Sega Saturn. In Japan, Shining Force 3 was a video game released in 3 parts across 3 discs: Scenario 1, Scenario 2 and Scenario 3, released individually across late 1997 and 1998. In North America and Europe, only the first entry, Scenario 1, was translated into English and was simply titled Shining Force 3 for its release in mid-1998. The game was generally well received, albeit with relatively limited sales due to its release late in the Saturn's lifespan. Most critics also expressed appreciation that Shining Force 3 retained the same essential gameplay as previous Shining Force installments, which they considered more refreshingly simple than that of most tactical RPGs of the time, enabling a faster-paced and more fun style of play. The first Scenario title went on to sell just over 950,000 copies worldwide. Sales figures for the other 2 parts remain unknown. Astal is a 1995 platform video game developed and published by Sega. It was released early in the Saturn's life and used hand-drawn graphics. The animations for the cutscenes were provided by Tokyo Movie Shinsha. Astal is a 2D side-scrolling platform game. The player must guide the title character through the course of a level, while avoiding or eliminating obstacles and opposing forces. Certain parts of the level's environment, such as trees or rocks, can also be picked up and thrown. A limited asymmetrical co-op mode includes a second player controlling the bird character's action, which includes wing attacks and dive bombing. The game received mixed to negative reviews, with the art style, short levels and game difficulty being heavily criticised. Astal was only released in Japan and North America and went on to sell just over 950,000 copies. Virtua Fighter Kids is a 1996 fighting game developed by Sega AM2 and published by Sega. It is an installment of the Virtua Fighter fighting video game series and a super-deformed version of Virtua Fighter 2. All the characters have big heads and the music is at a faster pace. The gameplay itself is slightly tweaked from Virtua Fighter 2. The Saturn version includes some new FMVs and programmable button sequences to allow players to test and use pre-made combos. Despite being children, some of the fighters retain the adult characteristics of their Virtua Fighter 2 counterparts, such as facial hair, muscles, and breasts. Virtua Fighter Kids divided reviewers. To an extent, however, most reviewers criticised the short reach of the kid characters. Despite the childish appearance of the characters, the game still retains that fast-paced arcade-style gameplay like the other titles in the series. From its release, Virtua Fighter Kids managed to sell just over 1 million copies worldwide. Fighters Megamix is a 1996 fighting video game developed by Sega AM2 and published by Sega. It is a crossover between Sega's 3D arcade fighting games, Virtua Fighter 2 and Fighting Vipers, with unlockable characters from several other AM2 games, such as Virtua Cop 2 and Daytona USA. Developed for Sega Saturn, it had a global release in 1997. Unlike most of AM2's games of the era, Fighters Megamix did not have an arcade release. Fighters Megamix utilized the concept originally used by the King of Fighters, whereby characters and styles from different games were mixed together. It allows gamers to play as the bosses of both Virtua Fighter 2 and Fighting Vipers without codes. Upon release, it was hailed as one of the Saturn's best games, with critics deeming its crossover mechanics a complete success, and the game went on to sell over 1.1 million copies worldwide. Sega Rally Championship is a 1995 racing game developed by Sega AM3 and published by Sega. The Sega Rally Championship simulates driving on different surfaces with different friction properties, with the car's handling changing accordingly. As the first racing game to incorporate this feature, Sega Rally Championship is considered to be one of the milestones in the evolution of the racing game genre. It was also an early rally racing game and featured cooperative gameplay alongside the usual competitive multiplayer. The Saturn version was met with almost universally positive reviews and would go on to sell 1.2 million copies worldwide. In Japan, Sega Rally Championship topped the charts on release, coming in #1 during Week 52 in 1995. It was a major system seller for the system in the United Kingdom, becoming the fastest-selling CD game at the time. Virtua Cop 2 is a 1996 light gun shooter arcade game developed by Sega AM2 and published by Sega. The game features 3 levels through which the player's movement is automated on a predetermined path. However, unlike the first Virtua Cop, at certain points the player picks their route from 2 possible choices. As with the original Virtua Cop, the Saturn version of Virtua Cop 2 received mostly positive reviews for its fun gameplay and close translation of the arcade version, while being criticized as too lacking in longevity for a home console game. However, some critics, rather than complaining about the longevity, noted that while it takes about the same amount of time to complete a single playthrough as in the original, the game is much longer than the first Virtua Cop when taking into account all the different level branches. The game has sold over 1.2 million copies worldwide. Virtua Fighter 2 is a 1995 fighting video game developed by Sega AM2 and published by Sega. It is the sequel to 1993's Virtua Fighter. At the beginning of 1995, Sega AM2's Sega Saturn division was split into 3 sub-departments, each one charged with porting a different arcade game to the Saturn: Virtua Fighter 2, Virtua Cop, and Daytona USA. Due to unexpectedly slow progress in the Daytona USA port, a number of members of the Virtua Fighter 2 team were reassigned to Daytona USA. In March, AM2 Research completed the Sega Graphics Library, a Saturn operating system which made it feasible to create a near-arcade perfect port of Virtua Fighter 2 for the Saturn. Virtua Fighter 2 was critically acclaimed for its gameplay and breakthrough graphics. It introduced the use of texture-mapped 3D characters and was one of the first video games to use motion capture animation technology. The Sega Saturn version was well received for its graphics and gameplay, becoming a blockbuster hit in Japan and sold relatively well in other markets, selling more than 2.2 million units worldwide. That is all for this video. I honestly didn't think I would ever be able to make this video, as the Saturn is one of the most difficult systems to obtain reliable information in terms of game sales. The Sega Saturn was my first 32-bit console after renting both the PlayStation and Saturn in the early days of release, and decided that the Saturn appealed to me the most at the time. My first games for the Saturn were Sega Ages Volume 1, Sonic Jam and Tomb Raider. I later bought a Sony PlayStation shortly after with Tomb Raider 2 and Gran Turismo. Have you played any Sega Saturn games? If so, what was your favourite? I would like to hear from you. Also, I ask that you leave a like, and if you haven't already done so, subscribe to the channel and hit that bell for more notifications. I am already working on my next game review, and my next top 10 video will be for the best-selling games for the PlayStation 4. Thank you for watching. I hope you have enjoyed this video. Here are some recommended videos for you to watch from this channel, and I will see you again next time.